Hey everyone, so today is actually our 40th episode together, which is incredible, and thank you so much for sticking around, whether this is the first episode you're listening to or the 40th. I appreciate you all, and today we're discussing Sal Khan's book, One World Schoolhouse. I absolutely loved it. We are talking about mastery learning in this episode, but we will discuss other topics in the future too. I do also disclaimer at the very end that I was highly caffeinated during this filming, and yes, I basically was really caffeinated, so if anything doesn't make sense, we'll just blame it on the caffeine. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. So today you may have noticed a change in the background, and that is because I have moved. So there have been some life changes, and this is now the new scenery you'll be used to, with a very beautiful ready to redo in the background there. So yeah, changes are happening, and today we are going to jump into a very close topic, a very topic close to my heart. That's what I wanted to say. Moving on from that, today we are discussing a topic very close to my heart, and it's based on the book One World Schoolhouse by Sal Khan. Sal Khan, that name you may or may not be aware of, Khan Academy, the creator of Khan Academy, and it is the essential toolkit for any high schooler or primary schooler actually now, because they offer resources for primary school and secondary school. But it's your go-to. It's your cheat sheet. It's your slow step-by-step tutorials on topics from maths to geography to language. Oh, I will actually fact check that one. I'm not sure if they do languages. Okay, so there are actually no tutorials on languages so far, at least from what I've researched. So if anything, this is a good reminder for Khan that languages are important too. But anyway, this platform is so useful for any student, and this book that he has written, it's called One World Schoolhouse, and there are so many important concepts within it, and I thought initially I would do a huge book review, but it would end up being maybe 40 minutes long. So I thought instead, let's break it into digestible chunks. The first being the main theme, which is mastery learning. But I thought before we jump into mastery learning and what it is and why I love it so much, I thought to just give a bit of context behind Khan Academy and how it got set up. So Sal Khan, he way back when, I think in 2000 or something, he was tutoring his cousin Nadia. Nadia was struggling in maths, in this particular section of maths. I think it was unit conversion. And so he was tutoring her, and then word got out through family. They're like, free tuition? Yes, free tutoring. So then the whole family just jumped on board, and it was just unfeasible for him to tutor everyone over the phone. That was at the time where it was just a phone call and to tutor that way. And so he created Khan Academy as a way to just tutor his relatives, which, as you know now, has just expanded to an insane amount of people across the whole world. So that's the brief history of Khan Academy. If you do actually want to know more about it, he's released some TED Talks about it, and he just gives context as well as a Google talk. I can link that in the show notes. But going back to the book itself, he released it in 2012, so nearly 10 years ago now, and the theories within it are so relevant, and we just don't see those theories in practice in schools today. So mastery learning, what is it? So mastery learning is essentially learning content to the point of mastery, to the point where you understand it back to front. You understand the topic. Someone can quiz you in multiple different ways, whether it's a multiple choice, which I hate multiple choice, but if it was multiple choice, or if it was extended response, or if it was application as well, you would be able to answer it because you have a fundamental knowledge of that topic. And this, unfortunately, is not what you see in school, because a lot of the time the schools just move on. So they just fly by. There are students who just go up, I don't know what just happened, and they do some sort of test, And then the class has to move on because there's a curriculum to meet. And it's really, really unfortunate because the consequences of that, by not allowing each student to have time to master the content, is you get students saying, oh, I'm so dumb. I'm so dumb. I'm so stupid. I don't understand this. Or as what Sal Khan refers to as hitting the wall. And this is essentially where students will be good up to a point. Sure, their foundation's a little bit shaky, but they've gotten by because the concepts haven't been too challenging. Up until a point where they can't escape it anymore and they hit a wall, and that's when they think they're dumb or where they just don't understand a subject and lose motivation altogether. So let's use the example of maths. Addition, subtraction, the foundations, sure. Then it goes to multiplication and division. But say if the student was struggling with addition and subtraction. So they've gotten by, maybe they got a 70% or something on their test, and they get to multiplication, division, maybe they get around a 55%. But once they're expected to do something like algebra, that's where they hit the wall because they don't have an 100% understanding of addition and subtraction. So of course they will hit a wall with something more challenging that requires this foundational knowledge. Am I rambling? Maybe so. I hope this makes sense. So when students come to me and they say, oh, I am so dumb, I just don't understand this, I will never understand this, I just go, well, it's because you just don't have a firm understanding of the basics. If you were to go back to the basics and have the time, so if school were to let you have that time to really revisit everything, then you'll realize that you're not actually dumb. It's just that you have what Sal Khan refers to as Swiss cheese learning, where you have holes here and holes there because you haven't had the time or the personalized learning to be able to make that cheese a full-bodied cheese. And in Sal Khan's TED Talk, I will link that in the description. He uses the analogy of house building, which I think is absolute genius. So it goes like this. Say if you're trying to build a house and you have really moldy walls, there's holes in the ground, it's rats jumping in and out, and the inspector comes in. In this case, the inspector is supposed to represent testing or grades. And the inspector just goes, it's a decent job, I guess. Like, you'll get by. It's around about a 60%. Go ahead and build the second floor. And that is essentially what school is. Once you get to a stage, if you just pass by, if you just skim over and get a 55%, you're all good. And the curriculum would just move on and you'll have such a shaky foundation where you build onto the second floor, the third floor, the fourth floor, and you'll ask yourself why suddenly everything just crumbles down when it's blatantly obvious that it's because your foundations are so shaky to begin with. And so Sal really talks about this in the book. And he talks about how students are set up to fail. Even if they get something like an 80% or a 90%, there's still a percentage that hasn't been accounted for. And so students will be wondering, why don't I get this? When in fact the classroom has just moved on and glossed over the fact that they don't understand everything, and then they reap the consequences later on. And there was this thing that Sal wrote in the book, which I just loved, and he was referring to students studying maths. And he says the problem was students didn't really know maths. They knew certain words and processes that described maths. And I am very guilty of this because rote memorization is and was my forte. I can recite a book and sound very, very smart, but I don't know much about, I can't apply that knowledge. And so what we're doing is we're encouraging very surface level learning and never really having that full-bodied conceptualization of a topic, which is just such a shame. So going on from the problems, what are the solutions? And Sal really talks about these solutions, one of them being just don't let the students move forward until they have mastered the concepts. So for example, with maths, Until the students have mastered addition and subtraction, they will not be able to move on to multiplication and division and algebra, so on, so on. Because he talks about in the book the idea of calculus, which is considered the death of many students in university. And he just describes calculus as the mastery of algebra and trigonometry. And so if the students haven't mastered algebra and trigonometry, they will surely fail in calculus. So going back to the idea of the solution, just don't let students move on until they show a full conceptualization of the basics. What does that mean though? It means that schools won't have classes that move all at one pace because every student will be at their own, they're doing their own learning journey, which means that they will all be studying something at different times, at different stages at the same time. And so how can this be done? Because, traditional school means that everyone works at their own pace. He suggests to use these online resources. So Khan Academy has online resources where it will step you through from the foundations to the more complex topics. And so they'll test you in different ways, and then you'll get personalized suggestions and personalized questions in regards to things that you don't understand properly. And so this is using AI to really focus on your weaknesses and to get you to have that full-bodied understanding of the topic. And this is actually what we discussed with Jean in one of our earlier, way back, one of our earlier episodes, where he talks about how AI will be our personalized tutor, where it will be able to identify real time what our weaknesses are and focus on them until we understand it. So going back to the solutions, not having a class that moves at the same pace, but having students work on their own individual modules or whatever it is, and having the teachers be a tutor wandering around seeing who has problems. And that's actually a really genius way because then students don't feel pressured to either speed up or slow down according to the whole class, going back to the idea of personalized learning. So the other solution that Sal references is to abolish grades because using the knowledge or using the logic of mastery learning, grades actually won't exist anymore because all students will have 100% because they would have mastered all the foundational knowledge up until the more complex topics too. So having a class working at different pace, working at their own pace, removing grading, and trying to support that idea of mastery learning. So I hope this topic makes sense. I am a little bit caffeinated, so I apologize if I have just rambled because my head is working much faster than my speaking right now. Anyway, so that's the topic of mastery learning, and yes, we will go into other topics within One World Schoolhouse, the book of Sal Khan, in future episodes. See you next time.